if they were so obsessive about crushing gold and silver, in large part to protect this fiat currency monopoly, I've, of course, been expecting the exact same behavior with respect to Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, blockchain, because the motives are at least as strong, if not stronger, given the fact that this new technology could become even more universal.
Hey friends, 2 important quick announcements before we begin with Jeff. First, Virtual Shield VPN reached out to be a sponsor of SGT Report, and I use Virtual Shield VPN myself, and I think it works great. Browse the web safely and anonymously and counter Big Brother's attempt to track, trace, and sell your personal data. And check out IdentiSafe, a great feature from Virtual Shield that includes a microphone and webcam blocker, and it also automatically deletes your browser history, cookies, and can even shred files so they are unrecoverable. Use the link below and save 50% off your first term. So this Christmas, get it for yourself or give a Virtual Shield gift card and give the gift of internet privacy and security. Also guys, a quick word about our good friend Gans Shimura. You know his YouTube channel, Face Like the Sun. Sometimes bad things happen to good people. Actually, far too often bad things happen to good people. And something bad just happened to Gans recently. He was part of a phishing scam that resulted in around $10,000 being stolen from him. He has a young family. They're trying to buy a house. This couldn't have happened at a worse time. I just thought it would be really cool, given that I have the most generous YouTube audience in the world, if maybe everybody pitched in $1 or $2 or $5 to his PayPal account, we could help at least try to make him somewhat whole. So if you guys are inclined to want to help Gans, his PayPal address is below this video in the more information section. It's ganishimura@gmail.com. We could really help repair some of the damage that's been done by thieves. And thanks so much for your generosity. You're truly wonderful people. Given the volatile attitudes toward cryptocurrencies, I hesitate to even have this conversation, but we're going to do it anyway because who better to bring us a level mind about all of it than our good and old friend Jeff Nielson, who used to run bullionbullscanada.com. He's now the content editor for stockhouse.com, and we have Jeff back on the phone right now. How are you, Jeff?
Great, and thanks for the illustrious introduction.
Well, I don't know how illustrious it is, but you were a victim of Google censorship over there at Bullion Bulls Canada. And, of course, the precious metals manipulation did you guys no good. It's just a shame, isn't it? I'll tell you what, we sit and watch the cryptos go higher by the day. Meanwhile, those of us that had the presence of mind and intelligence to buy physical precious metals, especially silver, one of the world's most rare assets, and that's what it is. It's an asset, a monetary asset, free of the chains of debt by the banks. None of us get rewarded for that clarion call. We just get punished. It's an old story at this point.
An old story, but we could be seeing a new chapter on it because I'm seeing some, as Yogi Berra would say, signs of deja vu all over again in the Bitcoin market.
Oh, do tell. Flush that out. What do you mean?
Well, so, of course, as your audience knows, and of course we know, one of the ways that the big bank cartel has been able to keep their chokehold over precious metals markets is through their fraudulent futures markets. And of course, we got the inside scoop on that going all the way back to 2010 from none other than the infamous Jeffrey Christian, who blurted out in a hearing before the CFTC that, of course, only 1% of what actually trades in what the bankers call the gold market, quote unquote, is actually gold, and 99% is paper. And of course, the majority of that fraudulent paper is transacted in the equally fraudulent futures markets. So I don't know if you heard the latest announcement, but the big banks have brought futures trading to Bitcoin.
Of course, I've been watching it very closely, but it'll only be cash settled. They're not actually playing with the underlying physical asset. Not that Bitcoin is necessarily physical, but you can take delivery of it in your own private wallet. There's less than 21 million in existence right now. I think the most that'll ever be mined is some 21 million. There's only like 15, 16 million of them out there right now. It's a tiny, tiny market, and these guys seek to manipulate it, but they're going to have a hard time doing it because it's going to be very blatant should they try to naked short Bitcoin, Jeff.
Well, but so much of the criminal activities of this cabal have been, very blatant. And I mean, it just, when there's no enforcement and, no vigilance in the media, I mean, you can engage in blatant crime, ad infinitum and, escape scot-free, as we've seen with the big bank crime syndicate. And so, I mean, I don't really see any reason for this to change, except for the fact that, of course, there's going to be a different segment of the investing community watching this futures trading than has been, watching precious metals futures trading over these last, many years, and pulling their hair out in frustration over the obvious fraud. So yeah, I mean, maybe the fact that there's going to be some different eyes scrutinizing this futures trading will have some impact, but I'm quite pessimistic, and I mean, I'm also incredulous because I'm still trying to figure out how in hell this futures trading is supposed to work. Because of course, as we know from precious metals markets, the wild betting that takes place in these futures markets is a mechanism for drowning out the actual trading of the physical metal in order to push prices around wherever they want. But of course, Bitcoin is a unique market in that its price is supposed to be exclusively, precisely, and absolutely determined by an algorithm. And so what I'm asking myself as this futures trading is unrolling before our eyes, is how this is going to play out with this algorithm. Because for me, the moment that futures trading starts impacting with the Bitcoin market, Bitcoin becomes totally delegitimized because its algorithm ceases to have validity.
Well, here's the thing that I think is curious about it. As you know well, and our listening audience who's so intelligent knows well, because we've all been following the precious metals markets for so long, as it pertains to physical silver and gold, the price was set by the City of London twice daily forever in the silver and gold price fix, which had been controlled by the Rothschilds, I think, right up until around 2006 or so, 2008, something like that. And the difference with Bitcoin is that it is a 24/7 global market. So there will be global eyes on this should the Wall Street Vipers decide to do any shenanigans all too blatantly. And they don't have the City of London to help them control the price twice a day.
Yeah, no home field advantage in perpetrating this particular act of fraud. But, at the same time, as I was watching, cryptocurrencies and now blockchain start to, acquire critical mass, I mean, I've just been waiting, to see what the crime syndicate is going to do. Because, of course, for the exact same reasons that they feel compelled to continually attack the precious metals markets, those same motivations exist with respect to both cryptocurrencies and blockchain. This new technology represents a direct threat to their fiat currency counterfeiting monopoly. And, so if they were so obsessive about crushing gold and silver, in large part to protect this fiat currency monopoly, I've of course been expecting the exact same behavior with respect to Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, blockchain, because the motives are at least as strong, if not stronger, given the fact that this new technology could become even more universal.
All right, interesting. Now, I wanted to have you on, obviously, but we haven't talked in a long time, but I know that you've been studying the blockchain a little bit, getting up to speed here on Bitcoin. So I want to ask you a couple of yes-no questions. And I know it's super hard to say yes-no, but I promise you'll have the floor after I play a soundbite for you. But first of all, yes-no question to this, and then we'll circle back to it. Is Bitcoin inherently evil?
No.
Is the blockchain inherently evil and a representation of something that could take us into the quote-unquote mark of the beast? Yes or no?
No.
Okay. Now I want to play a soundbite for you from Jeff Berwick, who just did a video that was released on the 14th. And he talks about Mike Adams, who says that, and I love Mike Adams. Mike Adams is a personal friend of mine, a supporter of SGT Report. I hold Mike Adams in extremely high esteem. I love Mike Adams. But he outlines Mike Adams' belief, and it is also Catherine Austin Fitz's belief, that Bitcoin is a government op or an NSA op to lead us into a digital one-world currency. To which Jeff Berwick says, if that's true, they really screwed up. Let me play this soundbite for you, and then I want your opinion on it.
I actually generally agree that the globalists will try to destroy Bitcoin and force people to use their own cryptocurrency. But he tries to make the case that Bitcoin was created by the government itself, which would mean one of two things. Number one, it was created by the government and central banks and has backfired on them massively, creating a situation where they sit on the cusp of extinction. Or number two, they actually created the very thing that can destroy their entire system with the hopes to later co-opt it and then hope to destroy it to bring in their own cryptocurrency. I don't think either is the case, and certainly number 2 would be insane for them to do. But that's what the health ranger is saying.
Jeff, I just wanted to play that soundbite for you just to level set, because we don't know exactly what's true, but I think Berwick makes an interesting case, which I think you might agree with.
Yeah, I definitely lean more towards that interpretation. And, there's a couple reasons for this. For one thing, yes, there's certainly all sorts of scenarios you can construct where the big bank crime syndicate would want to co-opt and make use of cryptocurrencies for their own nefarious purposes. But, I mean, that's a situation that exists in so many facets of our economy. The bankers don't necessarily create a particular niche or financial vehicle, they just pervert it. And also, of course, our experience with this crime syndicate is that they're not creators and inventors. They're thieves. So, they see somebody else come up with a good idea, and then they look to steal it and pervert it. So I would be extremely surprised if they had the ingenuity to devise something like this, but certainly they have both the track record and the mentality, the desire to pervert it.
I think that's very good analysis. It's very interesting analysis. And I wanted to ask you this, too, as it pertains to the NSA, who Dave Kranzler believes was behind the creation of Bitcoin. There was recently a video that I posted at the Phaser suggesting that the white paper was indeed written by hands that involved the NSA. Is it possible, and of course this is a leap of faith, but is it possible that white knights within the NSA wanted to give this technology to humanity to usurp these Rothschild central banks? We've seen other whistleblowers come from the NSA. Edward Snowden comes to mind. There's so many people in our precious metals camp that believes everything's a psyop and humanity cannot win this battle, and the banksters have the deck stacked from morning till evening, 24 hours a day. There's no way we can win. Is it possible that maybe we can win and maybe we can bring these central banks down?
Well, my belief all along has been that the crime syndicate is certainly fallible, and in large part it's because they're composed of psychopaths, and psychopaths are inherently self-destructive. And I look at nothing more than just what they've done to their own power base across the Western world. When the crime syndicate was truly in an unassailable position, they used the West as their power base. They built it up. They fattened it up, and they spent their time pillaging the rest of the world. And of course, now with the current generation of psychopaths, they've taken it upon themselves to cannibalize their own power base. I don't look at any entity of this nature as having the level of intellectual depth to construct the sort of cryptocurrency scenarios that are being talked about by some other commentators.
All right, that's interesting. Yeah, when we think of the New World Order, we think of crusty old codgers like Henry Kissinger, and like Lord Jacob Rothschild, and like David Rockefeller, who went to meet not his maker, but he went to meet the one he worships not too long ago. And we're starting to see this old guard die off. But these secret societies, and they're not so secret anymore. I mean, the Council on Foreign Relations and so many of these other think tanks, they're in the wide open now. And among their rosters of members include people from the mainstream media. Unfortunately, it does seem as though this hidden power, which Woodrow Wilson talked about, is so well orchestrated and so widespread, it will survive even after the deaths of these century-old figureheads like Rockefeller. I'd like to think that we can tip the system back in favor of humanity. Well, I guess you kind of answered that question a second ago. You actually believe we can, huh?
Yes, but, that said, I mean, the path to get there, I'm very pessimistic that the only way we get toward a better world is by going through a very dark tunnel. And the reason for this is that the one thing that we have to credit the cabal with being extremely successful with is their brainwashing operations. And so, with such an enormous majority of our populations effectively brain dead, there's no possibility of the masses simply having this sort of general awakening on their own. The only way this is going to occur is through severe trauma and shock, and I don't see any path to that other than some horrific economic collapse and or wars. I mean, pestilence. I mean, we're dealing with the four horsemen here, so I mean, nothing is beyond their our planning.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you there. They're capable of anything, especially the more cornered they get. If they start to feel like they're a cornered rat, they're going to behave like one. And yeah, to that extent, I think they're capable of anything. I want to do a little word association. You know, we haven't spoken with you in so long. You've moved on to another chapter of your life there, working over at stockhouse.com. I want to just ask, for the benefit of new listeners who maybe haven't heard from you ever or in a long time, let's do a word association just to get your take on a couple of big chapters in human history. And the first one I want to throw out for you, Jeff, is 9/11.
Well, a farce, because anybody who looks at this event with a thinking mind can see through it instantly. I mean, it just is in elementary physical terms, because, of course, there's only one way known to the laws of physics to take a steel reinforced structure and bring it straight down, and that's by a controlled demolition. And the controlled demolition, as also a matter of physics, can only occur in one form, and that's with the bottom floor blown before the second floor, and the second floor blown before the third floor, and the third floor blown before the fourth floor, and all the way up. So this 9/11 mythology that somehow an aircraft hitting the side of this steel reinforced structure near the very top could cause the structure to melt straight down, it's beyond ludicrous. It's infantile. And anybody who accepts the official version of history is either completely ignorant of all of the laws of physics or so brainwashed that there's simply no brainwave activity taking place.
Yeah, and you didn't even mention World Trade Center 7, so everything goes double for that structure, which was never hit by an airplane. No, that's what I love about you. I didn't know what you'd say. We haven't spoken in a long time, so I wanted to ask you that. The next one I have written down is vaccines.
Scares the hell out of me. And there's a number of reasons. And I mean, even for people that haven't dived into some of the scary literature in this area, I mean, there's the simple reality that our medical regulatory structure permits big pharma to bring these drugs onto market with far less testing and far less safety protocols than any other products that are brought to market by big pharma. And I mean, that alone, scares the hell out of me, because when we look at the drugs that are being brought to market, that are supposedly being thoroughly tested, and then we watch the commercials for the horrendous complications and side effects that these supposedly healing drugs inflict upon people. I mean, so what could be capable, what could be the capabilities of compounds that haven't even been properly and safely tested?
Very good. We are in agreement, my friend. The vaccines scare the hell out of me too, especially as a father with a vaccine-damaged child. Certainly, we believe that's what happened to our boy, and we pay for it every day. So a lot of folks do. A lot of folks pay for the choice of vaccinating their children with all sorts of repercussions later in life. And here we'll move on to the next one. The FBI, known as the Federal Bureau of what they call investigation.
Well, just another tool of the cabal. I mean, and the sick thing is that law enforcement agencies in general have become essentially crime protection agencies operating for the benefit of the cabal.
And the final one on my list, you can take them as a combination or one or the other. Bill and Hillary Clinton.
A slimy couple. I mean, you can hate them both, but for entirely different reasons. Clinton was this unprincipled monster who was basically totally out to get what he wanted, and of course didn't care who got hurt along the way as long as he achieved his career goals. And I mean, in many respects, Hillary was the same, but I find her even more reprehensible because she possesses all of her husband's negative traits, and plus, the capacity to just, rationalize and turn a blind eye to virtually anything, including, decades of philandering from her husband. So, I think that finally the attractive veneer has been peeled off of these two people, and the most of the world now sees them for what they really are.
I agree, especially as it pertains to the Clinton Foundation and the missing billions of dollars as highlighted in detail by Charles Ortel. Okay, I said that was going to be the last one. I actually thought of two more. It's a great way to round out our conversation. Here's the next one. Cryptos.
Riddle inside an enigma. I don't think anybody truly understands where these are heading. And as, of course, we've discussed with our previous conversation, there's some dramatically different opinions on how they originated and where things are going with them. So, of course, with the current evolution with Bitcoin futures, I mean, you can automatically attach the word fraud to cryptocurrencies now because I think that's become inescapable. But, I think there's still a few more chapters to be played out in this drama that maybe some people can't foresee at this point.
Okay, and as I've been saying in interviews and occasional commentaries in occasions that I've been interviewed by somebody else, not every single cryptocurrency out there is inherently evil. Is that fair to say?
Oh, I would definitely agree with that, although I would attach the caveat that certainly with all of the newer ones, they are entirely products of greed. So, while there may be somewhat of a fine distinction between greed and evil, compared to the sort of industrial scale evil we're used to seeing with the banking cabal, I wouldn't, label the cryptocurrencies in that same category.
Okay. Well, and what I'm driving at there is that if even people believe that Bitcoin is and was and is a creation of the NSA, it spawned a free market response, which has in turn created many other cryptocurrencies, some of which have the potential to be extremely useful in building businesses on various different blockchains, etc.
Well, and so where things get interesting, if you do subscribe to the theory that Bitcoin was a quote-unquote government creation, is, in dealing with some of the tech people in this industry, I've now become apprised of the fact that, Bitcoin is becoming obsolete. It was the first cryptocurrency, the oldest cryptocurrency, and thus it has the least sophisticated algorithm. And so because of this relatively low level of sophistication, Bitcoin is an energy hog in terms of processing cryptocurrency transactions. So I was talking with this one blockchain company whose focus is looking to become more efficient and not simply more larger and powerful in doing this cryptocurrency mining. And what was pointed out to me is to process a 1 Bitcoin transaction now eats up roughly a megawatt of power. Enough power to provide the energy for 200 homes.
Well, there's certainly been infighting, which is why there was the fork which created Bitcoin Cash, another fork, then Bitcoin Gold, and Bitcoin Cash has done very, very well. After it spun off, it hit a low of around $300. It currently is approaching $2,000. So stories to be told there. The same is true with Litecoin, which apparently works far better in terms of fast transactions. Okay, so here's the last one in our word association game. Silver and or gold, of course in physical form.
It's one of those choices where you can't go wrong, but it's also one of those choices where it's sort of not one size fits all. So for people at the lower end of net worth, obviously the focus should be on silver and getting the most bang for your buck in terms of protecting people for the financial calamity that lies ahead. At the other end of the scale, for the more affluent members of society, maybe they've got more wealth than space, and attempting to load up on silver in preparation would simply be, something that would occupy, far too much volume and space for their investment purposes. So, I mean, I think it's not so much a matter of one or the other, but reasons to hold both. Gold is still the money of governments. Silver is still the money of people. And obviously, there's roles for both of these in our economies and roles for both of these in the individual person's portfolio.
All right. Well, that's why we have him on, guys. He's always interesting and intellectual. This is a guy who definitely thinks things through and knows how to articulate himself very well. That's in part what makes him such a great writer. All right. I know I said that was going to be the last one. But look, extra innings. You're my buddy. We've known each other for a long time. You want to give me one more?
I'd be happy to.
All right. The 1988 cover of The Economist magazine showing a phoenix rising from a burning pile of fiat with the promise of a world currency by 2018. And when you read that article, it says the world currency would be called the Phoenix, and it said when it comes, welcome it.
Well, and of course, this is a drum that you've been banging for quite a few years now, and obviously you're looking quite prescient at the current moment with the evolution of cryptocurrencies and this whole prediction, quote unquote, now acquiring some perhaps additional sinister connotations. But I think when it comes down to those sorts of predictions, we don't necessarily have to take them absolutely literally and absolutely precisely, but more along the lines of statements of intention. So, of course, for several years before cryptocurrencies emerged on the scene, the bankers couldn't say enough nice things about SDRs, the special drawing rights of the IMF.
Right.
And I mean, that was even less of a currency, than cryptocurrencies. And there was a lot of push from the banking cabal to try to make that the evolution in the fiat currency, fraud game that we're playing. And I think basically if they would have gotten some traction with that, that could very well have been what they chose to roll out. But the idea fell flat because, even with the brainwashed masses they're dealing with, I don't think they could get the idea to fly that a drawing right could somehow be morphed into a currency, because credit is not a currency. I mean, they're fundamentally different entities, and there was no way that special drawing rights could ever properly function as a currency. So, maybe it was going to be SDRs, maybe it's going to be cryptocurrencies. Of course, with the timing, that now seems to be much more temporal. But, who knows if something else could be rolled out in the meantime. And then, of course, if we're going towards a truly cashless society, then, we don't necessarily have to actually have currencies per se. We just simply have to have units and numbers attached to them. And I mean, we were already getting so ephemeral with what we call currency that, maybe the whole concept from the 1980s of a one world currency has become obsolete in the bankers' thinking.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see. It's an interesting time in which we live. That is the understatement of the century. I just can't believe how quickly things are changing on a daily basis, a weekly basis. When you and I first met, Jeff, and actually, just for people who don't know, I think you're one of the first interviews I ever did. Certainly one of the first 2 or 3 people I ever interviewed, and certainly my first regular guest. And back then, things were happening quickly. But when I launched sgtreport.com back around 2010-ish, in that time period, 2011 maybe it was, I don't think in a week as much happened as what now happens in a day. I call it the quickening. It's just things are happening faster and faster, and it's getting crazier and crazier.
And I think that's another indication of the crime syndicate losing control. When I look at events, I see a lot more reactionary type of events in the media, and a lot less that seem to be sort of orchestrating. And, I think that that's going to be something that we're going to see increasingly unfold. As you point out, the general pace of events seems to be accelerating. And that's, when you see a powerful entity losing control, instead of being able to make, occasional moves that have, long and drawn out implications, they're having to continually rethink their plans, react, come up with new plans, and then react to the consequences of those. And of course, something I've sort of laid out to my own audience in the past is that by their very nature, psychopaths are instant gratification creatures, and they know what they want to get it now, and creatures who think with that mentality are continually being tripped up by the law of unintended consequences. They execute a plan, with their tunnel vision because they know what they want, and they're oblivious to the ramifications. And so, we see this, we've seen it so often in the past. And I pointed out in a number of my articles. The crime syndicate takes this, dramatic action to, it hopes, achieve one of its goals, and it ends up creating even worse problems for itself. And so, this is what I see being responsible for a lot of the acceleration in events in general and bad events in particular.
Yeah, from your lips to God's ears. Well, I'll tell you, you know what, just back up a little bit. I mentioned the CFR on this call. 10 years ago, certainly 20 years ago, none of us knew what the CFR was. We didn't know what the Trilateral Commission was. We didn't know what Bilderberg Group was. We didn't know what the Bohemian Grove was. And we certainly didn't know that the mainstream we didn't know about Operation Mockingbird. There, I just said it right there, too. We didn't know that the mainstream media was a asset, a tool of these people. But people are waking up now. CNN, fake news. MSNBC, fake news. Washington Post, Bezos blog, fake news. New York Times, propaganda. People are waking up because now we can see the man behind the curtain, Jeff. That's the good news.
And, I would still go back to a metaphor that I've been using for a number of years, and it's, the boy who cried wolf. And, of course, the way that the fable rolls out is you have this, boy, and he tells a lie, gets away with the lie, thinks this is the greatest tool he's ever come across, and he starts lying more and more often. And of course, it's the fable of the compulsive liar. And the mentality for all these compulsive liars are the same. They encounter success with their initial lying. They become giddy with the power that this brings to them, and they use this tool more and more often. And of course, the evolution is this. From the compulsive liar's point of view, their lying is just more and more successful. They tell more and more lies, and they get more and more of what they want by doing it. But from the perspective of everybody else, the evolution is the precise opposite. As the compulsive liar tells ever more lies, more and more people start to see through the lying, and the credibility of the liar evaporates, and eventually nobody gets fooled anymore. And this is inevitable with all compulsive liars, because the whole reason somebody becomes a compulsive liar is you're in that psychopathic mindset where you have this tunnel vision and all you can see is what you want and how to get it, and you're oblivious to how other people react.
And you know what? I think you just described exactly why Hillary Rotten Clinton was such a deplorable, horrible, awful, worst ever presidential candidate, because she has a decades-long history, and so does her husband, of lying and really doing the bidding of her New World Order masters like the Rothschilds that held $100,000 per plate fundraisers for her. And people finally started to wake up, right, and call her out for her lies. The same, not just her, though. The same is true for politicians on both sides of the aisle. I mean, I'd argue the same thing has happened to Lindsey Graham to some extent, John McCain, the Bush family. You'll recall that Bush Sr. said he was going to vote for Hillary because Trump was so deplorable. So it's fun to watch the left and right be exposed for the puppets they are.
The faux left and the faux right, because, of course, it's just basically two hands of the same creature.
Yeah, amen. All right. Well, Jeff, what a pleasure to have you back on after so much time. I'll tell you what, we'll have to make sure we do this again, and we should probably make it more than once a year. So,
sounds like a plan.
Why don't you shout out for us how people can find you now that you're not running Bullion Bulls Canada on a daily basis? Where do people find your work?
So my day job now is with stockhouse.com. It's a market media site, and we're involved with promoting small corporations. And these are the companies that create all the jobs and come up with all of the good ideas that fuel our economies. And these are the companies that are continually being held down by the cabal for the benefit of its large cap entities, which it uses to soak up and cannibalize all of these corporations. So, I'm really happy to be able to try to help these companies promote themselves and to get ahead, because, I'm able to do something now where I can genuinely feel like I'm accomplishing some good. Whereas, one of the depressing things with what we've been doing is, we work so hard year after year to inform people, and, we don't often see a lot of tangible signs of the work we've done. And so, it's nice to be able to sort of go punch into work every day and, know I'm helping people, on a real-time basis.
Well, good on you, Jeff. We wish you only the best. You've been a long-time truth teller and a friend of SGT Report, and certainly a friend of the truth community and precious metals community. So I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you so much for your time, Jeff.
My pleasure, and I'm always happy to come back.
Yeah, and you're always welcome to come back. So thank you so much for joining us. And guys, I want to thank each and every one of you too for joining us. You know how much it means to us that you click a like on this video. If you did, share it within your sphere of influence on social media, and do visit SGT Report. We sure do appreciate it. The new site's been a little clunky. I'm getting slow load reports, so we're going to try to address that in coming months. Hopefully the sooner the better, to try to make that experience the best possible it can be. But thanks so much for your support at sgtreport.com, thephaser.com, and thelibertymill.com. Real news 24/7. God bless. Bye-bye.
It just shows, that a lot of people are unhappy with the current monetary system, which is dominated by governments and central banks. And that's why, also this the cryptocurrencies, especially Bitcoin, is rising.